Hello, so my name is Emily and I'm just going to share some things that I found helpful. This week I've been teaching Bible stories, Bible lessons, so I'm going to share some of the ideas that God gave me to make it more fun and just creative ways to get the children thinking in a fun way. Some other thoughts, what I've been learning through it all. So somebody asked me the other day how I kept up with cooking meals when I was busy at school the last term with Lydia, the last 4 weeks. I don't actually really remember, but I'll show you what I'm doing today since it is getting busy again. I'll show what I've done today to help. So today I am working from 12:30 onwards with Lydia. She's actually going swimming, so I'm going to look after her there. And we're having chicken pie for dinner, but the potatoes and carrots and chicken need cooking first, and then it needs to go in the oven for an hour. So this morning, since I had the time, I cooked the potatoes and the carrots and the celery and the chicken and the gravy that it goes in, so that tonight it will be a lot easier to just put together. And I went to the supermarket this morning. Sometimes in the morning you can get like reduced priced things if you use up or put in the freezer. So I got some pork mince, which was kind of cheaper, and so I've made a big batch of spaghetti sauce, so that will do a few meals. I can just freeze it in batches, and then that makes for an easy meal. I haven't made it with pork mince before, but hopefully it's the same. Hopefully it tastes just as nice as with beef. Last night I was thinking about the story of Mary and Martha, how Martha was so busy and Mary was sitting down at Jesus' feet, and how Jesus told Martha that she was too, worried and busy about different things, and how Mary had chosen the things that was important. And because it's starting to get busy now for me, I was thinking about that and praying that I would still be like Mary. But then I thought, well, how can you be like Mary when your life is very busy? But then I thought it was not actually really about not being busy. Like, okay, I know it's good not to be too busy, but does Jesus want us to not really do much, to just sit around all day so that we're nice and relaxed? That's how I thought this term was going to be, and then suddenly it changed. Was it that Martha was too busy trying to do things, or was it more her priorities? Jesus was a very busy man. He had so many people coming to him, and he did so many things, and yet he always found time to spend with his Father in prayer. And I think that's the same with Mary. It's not about that we should not be busy at all, that we should not really do anything. It's more about our priorities. What matters more? Like, do you make God a top priority? And then your life may still be very busy, but it's about putting him first and making time for him even when we are busy. So it's not really about being busy, it's more about priorities, because sometimes God's will is for us to be busy. He does want us to work and to be involved in whatever it is that he wants us to do. I'm reading through the book of John at the moment, and today, or the last time I read it, I was reading about Nicodemus, and this morning I was reading the story of the woman at the well. And Jesus spent so much time with people and touching people's lives and changing people, so he was very busy. And in the story about the woman at the well, he said to his disciples, "My meat is to do the will of the Father who sent me and to finish his work," or something like that. God didn't come to earth, Jesus didn't come to earth just to sit around and to be relaxed and to do nothing. He was very busy. He had a job to do, and as Christians we have a job to do. God has jobs for us to do, and yet just like Jesus, our time with God in it alone should be a priority. Now, if you're a mum, you might not always get time alone, but to make God a priority and spending time with him. So this week I started teaching the Bible lessons at school, and one day school was cancelled because there were some problems from the flooding, but 2 other days, yesterday and Tuesday, I did them. And I would like to show you a few of the ideas that I had. And the reason I want to show you is because I know at least a few of the people who watch this work with children, like with Sunday school or something else. So I only share them to give ideas because I love ideas. So we started with the story of creation, the beginning of the Bible, and This idea is one that I got from a school teacher a long time ago. So I made these picture cards for each day of the creation story. So on day 1, God made the light and divided the light to day and night. So I made up that picture. So I only showed the kids one at a time. So first I showed them that one, then I showed them that he divided the waters. So he made the sky and the ocean. And on day 3, he made the dry land and all that grows on the dry land. Okay, and then when you go to number 4, you put number 4 below the night and day. And so on day 4, God made the sun to shine during the day, which is what he made up here. And then the stars and the moon for at night, which is what he made on day 1. And then on day 5, he made the birds to go in the sky that he created on day 2. And the fish to go in the ocean, which was also from day 2. And then on day 6, God made all the land animals and the people which go on the dry land that God created on day 3. So that's quite a neat way of remembering what God made on each day. So on the very first day we did the week of creation, and so I had a bag like this and I filled it up with things that God made on those 6 days. Well, not real live things, but like either pictures of the things or toy things. So they're not all in here anymore, but for example, like a dog. So I got the kids, they all took a turn at coming up and shutting their eyes and pulling up something out of the bag. So for example, here's one. And so then they had to tell me what day did God make that thing on. So, and I had all sorts of different things, like not just cards, but toys and some real fruit and vegetables and things like that. So they all had a turn pulling out one thing and telling me what day God created on. So that was quite a fun way to review and to go over what God made on each day. On the second time, we reviewed what we learned on the first day. So I took along these skippo cards and I just had numbers from 1 to 7. So anyway, all the kids took a turn of taking a card and they had to tell me what God made on that day. So that was another fun way of reviewing it instead of just asking them the question. And for the second lesson, we talked about paradise and what it was like in the Garden of Eden before the fall. So when I'd kind of told the story and talked about it, I thought a fun way of reviewing it, or no, not reviewing it, but to think more about what it was like. I had this bag full of bits and pieces, and this time I just pulled them out one at a time, and they were actually divided into girls and boys. So I would say, girls, was this needed in the Garden of Eden? Did Adam and Eve need this? So for example, I had this house. Did Adam and Eve need a house in the Garden of Eden? And obviously they didn't, because they lived in a garden. So on one side we actually had 2 desks. So on one desk I put all the stuff that they didn't need, and then on the other desk next to my felt board with a picture of the Garden of Eden, I put the things that they did need, for example, or did have. So for example, they did have pears, so I put that by the Garden of Eden. And then on the other side we had the things that they didn't need. For example, they didn't need policemen, they didn't need money, they didn't need shoes because there were no prickles for the feet. They didn't need jerseys because it wasn't cold. I put these in. These are funeral sheets for my grandparents, but there was no death there. There were no funerals. So that's quite a neat way to talk about what it was like before the fall, because all the problems, like God made a beautiful, perfect world, but it's only sin that has brought all these things that we need and problems. And these were some of the other things I had put in that they didn't need, like pain relief and thermometer and glasses and sunscreen and guns and masks. I'm not naturally very creative, so I am thankful for these ideas that I had, but I do believe God gave them to me because naturally I'm not very creative. But I do find that when you do what God wants you to do, He does fill you with ideas and give you the help. So another idea I had was to write out some of the verses from the story. So these are actual Bible verses, and to get the kids to read them out loud with me. So instead of reading like just from the Bible, have one kid read from the Bible, I get them all to read it together. And I think it's important for them to like actually read it out loud and to say it themselves rather than me just reading it. So when I first started the creation story, I got them all to read out this verse together, and then like this one as well. And then these were 2 more that we did with the creation story. So that's another good idea if they're old enough to read, to get them to read it all together out loud. Just kind of reinforces parts of the story. And it's also good for them to read the, the Bible itself, not, So this last weekend, there was a lot of flooding in New Zealand. I think probably everywhere in New Zealand there was a lot of rain, and it's like the middle of summer here, so usually during summer it's more of a drought. We don't have enough water, and we sometimes have water restrictions. We're not allowed to water the garden, or we can only water it every second day. But yeah, this summer it was like the other extreme. There was actual flooding. So I've kind of had flooding on my mind. The other day I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So in these last 2 weeks I've started helping with Lydia, being her teacher aide again, just part-time, a day and a half. And I've started helping with a preschool 1 morning a week, and I've also started doing Bible lessons at our Christian school. So the Bible lessons are something new that I've never done before, at least at school. I used to be a Sunday school teacher like 12 years ago, so that's kind of been a long time ago. So it's been exciting to have a new opportunity, and I love the Bible, so I love to teach it, but it's also a bit daunting. And also doing like a few every week, like it comes back again fast. And so anyway, I've been doing 3 mornings a week. But I just found out, like I told the school I could only do 3 mornings because they actually have Bible lessons like the first half hour of every day. I found out that I could actually do 4 mornings. I thought I couldn't, but I realized that I could. And so it kind of overwhelmed me to think of doing an extra morning. And then I found out that I needed to do something else as well, to do more of planning for something else. And so I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But when I went to bed at night, my husband did our daily light reading. And it was all about floods. So keep in mind, we just had a weekend of flooding and lots of rain. But anyway, so the very first verse was, the floods lift up their waves, and then it had the verse, the Lord on high is mightier than the noise of many waters, yea, than the mighty waves of the sea. But then this was a verse that really stood out to me, because it's one I was thinking of a while ago. I've been reading through the book of Joshua, and I read the story of going through the Jordan River, passing through the river, and it was flooding as well. It says that it overflowed its banks. But when the Israelites obeyed God, and when the priests started stepping into the water, God made a path through the water for them. They didn't. So when I was reading through that story, I was thinking this verse that I'm about to read is a good one to go with it, because God made a way through the river for them. But anyway, so this verse that I'd thought about was a good one for that story is the same one I read my husband read in the daily light, and it is, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers they shall not overflow you. So here I was feeling overwhelmed about the busyness, and we've just had flooding, and to me it was a real comfort that when God tells us to do something, He will be with us and He will help us. He will help it to not be too much for us. So I was afraid of being too busy. But I don't want to get so busy that I neglect my home or my family, and I don't want to end up having health problems because I'm too busy rushing around everywhere. So that's what I was afraid of when I was feeling overwhelmed about all these opportunities. But this verse really just encouraged me that if I'm doing what God wants me to do, it won't be too much. It might feel like too much sometimes. But when it feels too much, that's when you cling harder to God. In the summer, I've been taking the children to the pools a few times, and Lydia, she can go in the really shallow pool. She's all right by herself. I don't need to be right next to her. If she falls over, she can get herself back up. So she doesn't need me as much in that pool. But in the deeper pool, where it's kind of up to here on her, if she falls over, she can't get herself back up. And so I have to be right next to her. And when it's deep, she really clings to me, and I take care of her. Whereas in the little pool, she doesn't feel that need to cling to me. And it can be like that when things are overwhelming. And I think this verse can apply to anything that's hard. So it can be like sorrow or sad times. This verse was a help to me when Lydia was in hospital a lot. That was a really hard thing. But it can also be with busyness. Floods can represent just so many things, like feeling overwhelmed with anything. And so, yeah, thinking of Lydia, when she's in a shallow place, she doesn't feel her need for me, but when it's deep, that's when she clings to me. And it's the same with us. It can be good for us to feel overwhelmed, for life to feel a little bit too overwhelming, because that's when we have to cling to God. And when we do cling to God, He does help us. Just like when the Israelites went through the river, God opened up a path for them. So even though I do need to be careful not to overcommit myself, if I'm doing what God wants me to do, He will help me. And so that is the question. Does God want me to do an extra day of Bible stories? That's what matters. Not about whether I'm going to be too busy. What does God want? Because if He wants me to do it, then He will give me the strength and the ideas and the ability to do it. And He will help me keep up with things. And then I went on to have this little story, which I'm going to read. And this story also has special meaning to me, because it was a help to me when Lydia came home from the hospital, and I was very overwhelmed because it was quite hard keeping up with her. She was on oxygen. She had a whole lot of medicines. She was on a monitor that beeped really loudly, and she had a whole lot of appointments, and it just felt too much to keep up with. It felt like a flood of too many things. So anyway, this I went on to say, Peter walked on the water to go to Jesus, but when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? So when Peter had faith, when he was looking at Jesus and walking along the water, he was fine. He was able to do it, even though it was impossible. God was helping him. Jesus was helping him. But once he took his eyes off Jesus and started to look around, he became afraid, and that's when he started to sink. And so I've found that when I keep my eyes on Jesus, when I'm focused on Him, I can do what I need to do, even if it may seem physically impossible or humanly impossible. But when I start to look around or start to think about all the busyness and all the things I have to do and take my eyes off Christ, that's when I start to sink and to feel very, very much overwhelmed. So, that was very encouraging. So, when you think of flooding, you can think of that verse, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. And also, practically speaking, the flooding also made me think, like, you need enough rain. Like in the winter, during the summer, it can get very dry, and you need enough rain so that the ground doesn't get too dried out. It's not good to not have enough rain. But on the other hand, you don't want floods either. Floods can also be damaging. So you just want the right amount of rain to keep the grass green and the gardens growing. And so rain can also be like stuff. So we want to have enough stuff. We want to have enough clothes, enough furniture, enough toys for the kids, enough food. And yet too much is also not a blessing. To have too much stuff, to have our houses so full of stuff that it's too hard to keep up with, that's like floods. It's overwhelming, and it's also not good. So what we want in our houses is to have enough stuff, but not way too much. So I thought that's also a helpful thought, practically speaking. If you're very overwhelmed with your house, then maybe you have too much stuff. So if you think of stuff in terms of rain, then too much is not a blessing.